Here's a health to the king and a lasting peace. May faction end and wealth increase. Come, let us drink it while we have breath, for there's no drinking after death. And he that will this toast deny, down among the dead men, down among the down among the down, down men, down among the dead men, let him lie.
I've touched on civilian society's treatment of soldiers in a few of these readings so far, and I'm going to focus on the issue more specifically in today's poems. The first is Tennyson doing his duty as laureate to glorify one of the most egregious and murderous examples of incompetent military leadership in the Crimean War, in his famous poem The Charge of the Light Brigade. For those not familiar with British history, the slaughter took place during the Battle of Balaclava, when a muddled order to send 600 lightly armed cavalry to take charge of abandoned Turkish artillery sent them instead down a valley to face dug-in Russian cannons and infantry. Fewer than a third of the brigade survived with their horses. Almost a third of the brigade was killed, wounded or captured. Kipling's sequel to Tennyson's poem, The Last Charge of the Light Brigade, was written some years later when some 20 or so destitute veterans lobbied Tennyson to ask him to help raise money for their relief. A fund was raised and distributed to the relief of Irish rebels, distressed dogs and cab horses with worn or spavined joints, and the remaining £24 then given to the starving soldiers. Tennyson's poem, an ignoble deflection of blame, has continued to spin the virtue of mindless obedience and self-sacrifice, whilst omitting any reference to the lethal incompetence of officers. The stanza referencing the great British public's charitable prioritising was left out of the published version, and the poem was largely ignored. Kipling's title is a telling pun, the last days of luckless survivors being a charge on their parishes and a grim, thankless end in Victorian workhouses. Not that Kipling was any sort of socialist, any more than Tennyson had any experience of soldiering. The last poem, Kipling's Tommy, was published in 1890, but it describes a public attitude to veteran soldiery that their modern counterparts will recognise. We've come a little way from plundering dead soldiers for their teeth and grinding their bones for fertiliser, as we did at Waterloo. Now our rulers have learned the value of memorialising the names of the dead instead of merely counting them, awarding medals among the ranks and marshalling solemn parades to glorify the slaughtered, whilst bestowing a sprinkling of kudos onto the assembled politicians. The truth remains that straitened circumstances, modest education and hormones are more often than not what draws young people to soldiering. Among the lessons young soldiers learn is that the masters of war are frequently fallible, and the causes they're sent to defend often unclear. Their shared experiences create immensely strong bonds, camaraderie, cooperation, mutual aid, even self-sacrifice. They fight for one another, and these attachments often persist among ex-comrades into civilian life. What they experience, of course, is practical socialism, but an integral part of the training and culture of soldiery is very consciously anti-socialist. Without a singular focus on the sovereign and notions of officers being a class or caste born to lead, armies can be a threat to privileged establishments. In republican countries such as the USA, allegiance to the flag expands to fill the role of monarchs. If ever there was a group of workers who should be represented by an organisation that lobbied for pay and conditions commensurate with the hazards of their job, and whose families should never want again for food, housing, health, or the very best education for their children, it is precisely the people who are trained to believe organised labour is unpatriotic and despicable. The charge of the Light Brigade. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward, all in the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade! Charge for the guns, he said. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade! Was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldiers knew someone had blundered. Theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon in front of them, volleyed and thundered. Stormed at with shot and shell, boldly they rode and well. Into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell, rode the 600. Flashed all their sabres bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabring the gunners there, charging an army, while all the world wondered. Plunged in the battery smoke, right through the line they broke, Cossack and Russian reeled from the sabre stroke, shattered and sundered. Then they rode back, but not the 600. Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon behind them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell. They that had fought so well came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell. All that was left of them, left of 600. When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made, all the world wondered. Honour the charge they made, honour the Light Brigade, noble 600. The last of the Light Brigade. There were 30 million English who talked of England's might. There were 20 broken troopers who lacked a bed for the night. They had neither food nor money, they had neither service nor trade. They were only shiftless soldiers, the last of the Light Brigade. They felt that life was fleeting. They knew not that art was long, that though they were dying of famine, they lived in a deathless song. They asked for a little money to keep the wolf from the door, and the 30 million English sent £20 and 4. They laid their heads together, that were scarred and lined and grey. Keen were the Russian sabres, but want was keener than they. And an old troop sergeant muttered, "Let us go to the man who writes the things on balaclava the kiddies at school recites." They went without bands or colour, a regiment 10 file strong, to look for the master singer who had crowned them all in his song. And waiting his servant's order, by the garden gate they stayed, a desolate little cluster, the last of the Light Brigade. They strove to stand to attention, to straighten the toil-bowed back. They drilled on an empty stomach, the loose-knit files fell slack. With stooping of weary shoulders, in garments tattered and frayed, they shambled into his presence, the last of the Light Brigade. The old troop sergeant was spokesman, and "Begging your pardon," he said, "you wrote to the Light Brigade, sir. Here's all that isn't dead. And it's all come true what you wrote, sir, regarding the mouth of hell. For we're all of us nigh to the workhouse, and we thought we'd call and tell. No, thank you, we don't want food, sir, but couldn't you take and write a sort of to be continued, and see next page of the fight? We think that someone has blundered, and could you tell them how? You wrote that we were heroes once, sir. Please, write we are starving now." The poor little army departed, limping and lean and forlorn, and the heart of the master singer grew hot with the scorn of scorn, and he wrote for them wonderful verses that swept the land like a flame, till the fatted souls of the English were scourged with the thing called shame. They sent a cheque to the felon that sprang from an Irish bog. They healed the spavin cab horse. They housed the homeless dog. And they sent, you may call me a liar, when felon and beast were paid, a cheque for enough to live on to the last of the Light Brigade. Oh, 30 million English that babble of England's might, behold, there are 20 heroes who lack their food for tonight. Our children's children are lisping to honour the charge they made, and we leave to the streets and the workhouse the charge of the Light Brigade. Tommy. I went into a public house to get a pint of beer. The publican, he up and says, "We serve no redcoats here." The girls behind the bar, they laughed and giggled fit to die. I hats into the street again, and to myself says I, "Oh, it's Tommy this and Tommy that, and Tommy go away." But it's "Thank you, Mr. Atkins," when the band begins to play. The band begins to play, my boys, the band begins to play, and it's "Oh, thank you, Mr. Atkins," when the band begins to play. I went into a theatre, sober as could be. They gave a drunk civilian room, but hadn't none for me. They sent me to the gallery, all round the music halls. But when it comes to fighting, Lord, they shoved me in the stalls. For it's Tommy this and Tommy that and Tommy, wait outside. But it's special train for Atkins when the trooper's on the tide. The troop ship's on the tide, my boys, the troop ship's on the tide. Oh, it's special train for Atkins when the trooper's on the tide. Yeah, making mock of uniforms that guard you while you sleep is cheaper than them uniforms, and they're starvation cheap. And hustling drunken soldiers when they're going large a bit is 5 times better business than parading in full kit. Then it's Tommy this and Tommy that and Tommy how's your soul? But it's thin red line of heroes when the drums begin to roll. The drums begin to roll, my boys, the drums begin to roll. Oh, it's thin red line of heroes when the drums begin to roll. We aren't no thin red heroes, nor we aren't no blackguards too, but single men in barracks, most remarkable like you. And if sometimes our conduct isn't all your fancy paints, why, single men in barracks don't grow into plaster saints. While it's Tommy this and Tommy that and Tommy fall behind. But it's pleased to walk in front, sir, when there's trouble in the wind. There's trouble in the wind, my boys, there's trouble in the wind. Oh, it's pleased to walk in front, sir, when there's trouble in the wind. You talk of better food for us, and schools and fires and all. We'll wait for extra rations if you treat us rational. Don't mess about the cookroom slops, but prove it to our face. The widow's uniform is not the soldier man's disgrace. For it's Tommy this and Tommy that and chuck him out, the brute. But it's saviour of his country when the guns begin to shoot. And it's Tommy this and Tommy that and anything you please. And Tommy ain't a bloomin' fool. You bet that Tommy sees.